Welcome to the Magnificast, a podcast about Christianity and leftist politics. I'm your co-host, Dean Detloff.
And I'm your other co-host, Matt Bernico.
Matt, we usually go down to the basement of the Family Life Center and we see all the bones, the Spirit Halloween bones. This time, though, I'm going to take you around the back of the Family Life Center. And I'd like to show you something that I hope fills the entire congregation with shame. And it is, well, if you could just kind of peer into this dumpster.
I'm looking.
Kind of let me know what you might see in such a dumpster. I think that'll just kind of get our conversation going here.
There are 28,000, I'm estimating, sticky still with the grape juice from communion, plastic, non-reusable communion cups in this dumpster, Dean. Why?
That's right.
Why are you showing this to me?
That's right. I'm showing it to you because we need to really face our sins head on. And I think it's time for the Family Life Center to make a change, a more sustainable degrowth change, and never have recyclable communion cups ever again. And I know it's going to be a tough sell at the big elders meeting, but I think you're going to have to make a really good PowerPoint. And I think that's what this particular episode can be about, making sure you have all the facts you need to convince them to never have these communion cups again.
Okay, but for real, just like for 1 second, just pausing the bit, just for a hot second, having to go into sort of like a church meeting and convince people that we should no longer use the plastic communion cups is what hell is like. That's hell. That is 100% hell. Oh my God.
I think it's probably purgatory. I think hell is when you actually didn't convince them and you just have to keep, drinking pee or something gross out of those communion cups forever. But purgatory, that's where you have a chance, and that's the worst of all.
Right, because you know that there's an opportunity that maybe you could change someone's mind, but it's going to take all 3,000 years or whatever of your time in purgatory to convince them. Okay, well, that's fair.
That's right. Should have said less swears. You could have gotten a few weeks off.
Now, I'm having what you might call a conversion experience right now. Hell is scary. We don't like it. Purgatory seems like okay, but the way that you're framing it now is really troubling to me. I'm really having some second thoughts about it.
That's right. We're going to have to go back to Rome. We'll get in front of Pope Leo. We'll get it all sorted out, Matt. Don't even worry about it. But this episode, folks, if you haven't guessed already, is about garbage. It's about trash. Matt and I were writing this book about degrowth, and by divine planning, by sheer coincidence, who knows, we have both become independently and paralleled obsessed with trash and garbage, and can't stop thinking about garbage and what it is and what it's not, and what a funny and awful thing to learn about. And man, Christians, when you know it, we make a lot of garbage for some really funny reasons, and that has been a particular special interest of mine lately, trying to figure out who makes them, what do they make them out of, and man, I wish I was doing like a master's degree in economics, because I would absolutely do a thesis on the like supply and value chains of disposable communion cups. What a wild thing to exist in the world.
Yeah, man. You know that those are made from non-recycled plastic in the first place, and they're because of the Welch's grape juice that has been in them, cannot easily be recycled. I'm sure that like you have to really scrub those things clean before you put them in the recycled bin. It's bonkers.
We're using dinosaur juice in order to make plastic cups to hold non-alcoholic Jesus juice. What a wild circle of life.
I've never thought about it that way before, and now that I am, I don't like it. That's rough.
All right, we're going to talk about garbage in a minute, but while we were preparing for this episode, Matt, I did pull up some websites just to kind of get a bead on these particular communion cups, because I do feel like they're the perfect example of Christian garbage. And just for fun, would you entertain me, Matt, in kind of giving me some hot takes on what you might think about these cups? I want to know how much you think they cost. I want to know what you think they're made out of, what you think are their special features, and I'll ask you some of these questions, as long as I have your consent to do so publicly, live, on air.
I suppose so, yeah, of course.
Okay. The first product I'm going to give to you it comes to us from Broadman Church Supplies. Who is the broad man? I don't know, but he's not environmentally conscious. These are disposable communion cups. There are 1,000 of them. This is a pack of one. First of all, how much do you think they cost? Okay, this is asterisk CAD, Canadian, but I'll give it to you even if you get in the neighborhood of it, US or Canadian.
1,000 cups, $10 USD.
Wow.
I know.
You could really undercut Broadman Church Supplies if you were able to figure that out to get your margins
Okay.
that low.
How far am I off?
Well, if you make another guess, I can't really tell. How
Okay.
can I give you a good hint without giving it away? You can.
How about-
I'll give you 2 more guesses.
Okay, 23 USD.
Okay, that's closer for sure.
Oh, okay. 32.99 USD.
All right. Wait, actually, I didn't check the exchange rate. You were right basically the second time, which, wow, the Canadian dollar's in trouble, I gotta tell you.
Oh, gosh.
It is
Thanks, Joe Biden.
$22.57 US dollars.
Oh, okay.
That's how much it costs to get 1,000 disposable communion cups.
Man, I wonder how long those would last you. I mean, I know it depends on like your congregation size and everything, but the average church, I can't imagine. Well, no, okay, no, hang on. If you're a church, I'm just kind of doing the church math in my head now. If you're a church who is using recyclable plastic communion cups, you could be a mega church, which could be problematic for the church math, but you are at most doing communion once a quarter, once every economic quarter or something. So probably that could probably last you for at least half of a year, at least 6 months, right?
Yeah, depending. And at the rate that churches are shrinking, they just become a better deal every year. Let's see. If you had to market these, what would be some sort of characteristics of such a cup that you might want to highlight to get people to buy them off of Amazon?
Let's see. Every plastic communion cup I've ever used has been like extremely fragile. Like you're going to be holding it in your hands, and after you drink it, you're going to be fiddling with it because I don't know, that's the kind of person you are. I am, at least. And it's going to crack. It's going to crack into 1,000 pieces, and it's going to be disruptive during church. So I think that like that's probably maybe like that would be the innovation, right? If you could create the plastic communion cup that would not be disruptive during church, that would be great. So it's like it's good for fidgeting, but it's not going to crack and make a really loud noise and make your mom get mad at you. So that's probably what I would say.
I mean, you got it in one. These cups, they have the clarity of real glass with no breakage.
Oh, cool.
They are disposable. They are what they call plastic glass. I don't think that's real, but that's what they call it. Some other great features on the baseball card of this communion cup. They have a flared cup rim for easy handling. So that will really make sure that you can get that Jesus juice past your lips.
Yeah, got it. It's got to be flared.
They have a smooth cup edge for receiving communion juice comfortably.
I'm sorry, is communion juice the technical term? Is that the word that they're using on their copy?
That is literally word for word what it says on this particular website.
Okay.
Communion juice.
All right. Fine. Fine.
They do say that they're recyclable, but they also say that they are reusable and dishwasher safe. So if you play your cards right and you instruct everyone to be very gentle with them as you hand them out, and to tell them to fidget very carefully, if at all, you might be able to get a few quarters out of these 1,000 cups. That $30 Canadian could go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you're like a real sort of penny pinching sort of church. I imagine that most churches check those things in the trash without thinking even once or twice about it. So, okay. Does it say what kind of plastic they're made out of?
It does not, which I think is also very funny and pretty...
Man, because depending on what it is, it might not even be recyclable.
True. They say that they are. I'm sure they are. They wouldn't say it if they weren't.
Yeah, but the thing about recycling is that like it depends on what your local recycling facility is capable of recycling. So it's like it can say recyclable, but it does not mean that it's recyclable. One of those great greenwashing trends.
All right, we can go to the real episode in a second here, but I do just want to note 2 things in particular. One is you can find disposable communion cups on Temu, which I think is very funny.
Dark.
I don't know what factory in China is making these and then kind of selling them on Temu, but good for them. Really getting the grift. Secondly, there are so many different kinds of these, as you might guess. There's gluten-free wafers. There's pre-filled cups. There's cups that are pre-filled and also have a wafer on top. Lots of stuff going on. You can also buy a communion cup filler, specific kind of funnel, essentially. I mean, they've really thought of everything, all the accessories. But the funniest thing to me is you can buy a silver or gold communion cup tray, which I have used and seen in churches before. And it costs $200, which I think is wild. To spend
Wow.
$200 on like an ostentatious communion cup tray and then fill it with recyclable communion juice holders feels blasphemous to me, but I don't know. I'm just too Catholic now, I guess.
Yeah, interesting.
Whoa, wait. Okay, sorry. One more pause.
Okay.
They do have a specific name for this line of products, and it's called remembrance ware.
Okay. That's such a loaded theological name in the title of what this is. Like, this is really for a specific church. If you are if you belong to sort of like an Anglican church that believes in the real presence, which there are some of them out there, these are not for you. You can't have these ones. Whoops.
That's right. You would not want to put Jesus in here. He would not be comfortable.
No. As a weird aside, 1,000 years ago when I was in university, I was working and living inside of a church, the same church, in fact. And one of my tasks was to fill up the communion cups every morning because they did morning prayer there. And I did use the little funnel to fill them up, and it was great. A highlight of my morning every day. So that's cool.
That's
they
awesome.
they were glass cups, by the way, so don't worry. No
Right.
plastic cups there.
So there you have it. This is an extremely specifically Christian kind of garbage, and I feel like that is just a good way to kind of get into an episode about garbage.
Yeah, big time. So on this podcast lately, there's been a very obvious emerging theme. We're interested in liberation theology these days, and we're interested in degrowth. And these are the two things that we're going to talk about probably for the next, 6 months or until we get a new sort of fixation in some other direction. Who's to say what it will be? There was a time when we talked about, Soviet Union and communism a lot, and that's cool. I'm still into that, but this is my new hyperfixation, and I cannot be dissuaded from spending all my time thinking about this. Unless this is your first episode, in that case, you have no idea what you walked into. We've been talking a lot about degrowth lately, and just to kind of like get out a term on the table so that everyone can sort of be on the same page. Degrowth is a downscaling of production and consumption to reduce ecological footprints, planned democratically in a way that is equitable while securing well-being. That is a definition that comes from Timothy Perique, who is a French degrowth guy. And there's actually a lot of cool stuff going on with that particular definition that we'll talk about maybe another time. Maybe we've talked about it in the past on the show. I can't remember, actually. It's a good definition, I think, of degrowth in general. Dean and I, in particular, on this podcast, we are probably always putting more of a socialist spin on it than some other degrowth people, and that's fine. We can do that because this is our podcast, and we can do whatever we want. But that we're not talking about something that is not socialist. So just to be clear, because some people in degrowth are weird. Anyways, these basic themes in degrowth have a lot of resonance with the concerns that we have found in liberation theology. That is probably obvious even just from that one example that I've just kind of read, that one definition that I've read. Liberation theology cares a lot about the patterns of consumption and production between global north and global south communities. In both of these ways of thinking, degrowth and liberation theology, there's a lot of emphasis put on the ways that people in the global north consume commodities and have underdeveloped economies in the global south to support that consumption. We've talked about all that stuff on the podcast before, and we will continue talking about it on the podcast until something else changes, until we want to talk about something else. But garbage is a pretty big part of that story, as we're going to come to find out. We wanted to focus a little bit more on, that part that we haven't talked about, waste and trash. And there's a really good reason for it. As the thesis of this podcast will tell you, capitalism needs trash. And that might sound like a funny thing to say. Trash usually seems like sort of like an accidental sort of feature of capitalism in a lot of ways that it is, but it is fundamental to the way that capitalism works. Disposability is fundamental to the way that capitalism works. And if that doesn't immediately click in your brain, that's okay, because it's probably not entirely obvious. We will kind of spell it out throughout this episode. But basically the idea is that because capitalism is a political economy that can only work as long as it's growing, trash becomes a central component to capitalism, because growth means more commodities, more consumption. And you can't have consumption if people already have everything. So that things are disposable, that they are planned to be obsolescent, that you're supposed to throw away your coffee cup. That is all attributable to the growth of capitalism. The problems kind of compound when you start thinking about it in that frame, though. Capitalism needs to grow, and growth comes from the production of more commodities, which facilitate more growth, and then more disposal, and then more growth and production and consumption. The whole thing kind of goes in circles. But throwing things away is like an important part of that cycle of capitalism that I think people kind of forget about or don't think about, because once you throw something away, it kind of like fades from your memory altogether. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's like a pretty good insight. So the production process of these disposable commodities are like really energy intensive also, and necessarily connected to growing carbon emissions. That's something that we've talked about in other episodes on degrowth, that you can't have production without energy consumption and carbon emissions because of the way that electricity is produced. So that's another piece of the puzzle. So not only is trash important for capitalism, but because of the way that production works, is also causing carbon emissions. So there's a lot going on there too. So the existence of the glut of disposable commodities themselves carry all kinds of like environmental and social problems that we haven't talked about, and maybe we will in a future episode. But when we are talking about like the macroeconomic trends of global capitalism, we have to recognize that trash is like a central part of that story. And that liberation, that we're getting from liberation theology, it means the abolition of capitalism for sure, the abolition of injustice, all these kinds of ideas. But also we have to think about how to abolish trash. Maybe that's too big of an idea. I mean, trash will always be with us. I think it's a Bible verse or something. But, waste is kind of a part of human life, and not all waste is bad. There's all kinds of, sort of like, there are all kinds of different ways that waste and decay are, productive for life. But the way that capitalism produces trash is not one of them. So, Dean, what do you think about this big idea here? I've laid it all on the table. What's your take on this whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it on the table. It's gross. All this garbage. I hate it. We got to get it off this table. I think, I mean, like you said, there's so much to say about waste and trash and garbage philosophically, and like what makes waste in a bad way and what makes it normal or kind of a part of natural cycles and so on. There's a lot of really interesting anthropology, for example, about how waste is a crucial part of what it means to be human. And like capitalism is really strange because on the one hand, it produces a ton of waste that's very bad. And on the other hand, it tries to like discourage any idle time or wasted time or like any kind of, like not making yourself productive or your life productive and so on. Whereas in medieval economies, for example, in Europe, there are, like part of the carnival is to just waste, to like destroy parts of the harvest on purpose and just like have fun and party. And capitalism is the abolition of having a good time in that way, even though rich people are allowed to like waste in other ways. So all that to say, just tons of contradictions going on, and I think that they're all very interesting and fun. It also makes me think a lot, trash in general, about the kind of biblical metaphors for trash. Paul talks about Christians being the refuse of the world, or the garbage of the world, the scum of the earth, lots of translations for it. But there's this kind of funny like valorization of what's discarded in Christianity. And at the same time, you don't want to like discard stuff in such a way that is destroying the planet. Or maybe like Christians have gone from the discarded to like the discarders in like a complicated way. Probably lots of fun metaphors to play with here. But I do think that the basic thesis that, we live in a world that is so marked by trash, and that's something that we, especially in the global north, just don't think about on purpose, is really important. I think it's also the kind of thing that can make you like a real stick in the mud. I've become increasingly more annoying to my wife. She doesn't tell me that, but I would be annoyed with myself if I had to live with myself in the same way that she does. Because I am like slowly trying to reduce waste in my life as much as possible, and it is making me a weird person. But I think that it's also so hard to do. Like, it's really, really hard to escape trash and really difficult to accept the inconvenience that refusing disposability introduces into your life. So all that to say, I think it's good. I think we can keep talking about garbage for a long time, and it's so big and such a huge topic that you probably can't have like one take on it. So all that to say, we should abolish like some trash, and other trash we should celebrate and think is great. And how to decide what trash is bad trash is something I don't think I'll do today, but something I do want to keep thinking about.
Yeah, I'm glad that you put it like that a minute ago. That this episode, or this, like, our interest in trash, I think is not a call to personal asceticism or something. I mean, whatever. If you want to try to use less plastic in your life, it couldn't hurt. That's fine. Um, I think that is a great idea, a great practice, something to strive for. I think also it is something that is like lends itself to self-demonization, because it's like
Yeah.
you can't avoid it, because the world is sort of designed in a way where you have to buy things that have plastic in them. That, whatever. Actually, okay, there's this documentary I remember watching a long time ago that was called like No Waste Man or something, and this guy tries to
Oh,
go
yeah,
a year
same.
with and he tries to go a year or whatever without buying anything that has like plastic packaging, and he just like can't do it. And like that is, I think, an important moral of the story, is that all the trash that exists is not because all of us consumers are dumb people. I mean, we might be dumb people. That's that's a possibility that I'm willing to accept, especially in my case. But it's also the fact that like this is a world that is designed in a particular way, and it's designed with a macroeconomic trend in mind, and one that we can't like lifestyle our way out of. So I think that's important to kind of say. No, none of you who are listening are at fault for using a disposable cup or whatever, because it's not really your choice.
Unless you are the person who specifically buys the disposable communion cups at your church, in which case you are definitely at fault and you should buy a different cup.
This is targeted just to you. We're very shallow casting. We've been trying to get you to change for a long time. You just have resisted, but now we're kind of putting on blast. You know who you are. Well, anyways, let me tell you some, I don't know. Let's talk about some things that kind of like fall into this category, or like that might help us highlight the ways that disposability or trash kind of plays into capitalism. So I think there's two really good and like ready to hand examples. One of them is the clothes that keep piling up in the Chilean desert. Dean, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. We might have mentioned this on the show in the past, but in the Atacama Desert in Chile, there is a growing pile of clothing, discarded clothing. And there's actually a lot of really interesting political economy reasons that it's there. Chile has these laws that have kind of like allowed the country to accept certain trash. But the irony of it is that it's like one country's trash, but Chile is trying to resell it. So it's actually their commodity in a really weird way. Lots of things to say about that. But basically, what that means is all this trash, which is to say, actually just overproduced clothes that they don't want to sell, they go to Chile and then they get kind of sold on a reseller's market. And then whatever doesn't get resold ends up going to the desert. And then people also pick through all those clothes in the desert and try to find stuff that they could resell or use or wear or whatever. But the point is that once it gets to the desert, it is garbage. That's what makes it garbage. It's in the desert. And it's crazy because the pile of trash, it grows at pretty astronomical rates every single year due to the overproduction of fast fashion. So brands like, I don't know, H&M and Zara and I don't know, whatever teens buy on TikTok, those brands, tons and tons of those clothes, they end up in this desert. And the wildest thing is that in the last couple of years, the growing mountain of clothes has become a site of tons of fires as well. The exact cause of the fires is kind of up for debate, but there's some reporting on it that suggests that some people are even like people who have like trucking businesses or who like cart the stuff away to the dump. They will potentially, some people claim, pay people who live near the dumps to like burn parts of their dumping loads so that they pay less in dumping fees, and then all of that, so then they can keep more of the profit, is the short of that. And then that fire spreads throughout the garbage dump, and then that spreads extremely toxic plastic filled smoke throughout the region. So all that to say, it is a wild example of like the end story of what happens in a system like global capitalism. So you have all these shitty clothes that are very bad, poorly made, designed. They basically have like planned obsolescence. Like you wash them 10 times and they start to pill and break. And also those clothes are like made in, Bangladesh, for example, in like a place like Rana Plaza where you have these horrible working conditions and people might die in them and all these kinds of really awful situations. So it's like really bad at the start. Then the clothes come or they don't come to the global north where they're sold to teens, and then they end up in the desert. Just a really kind of like troublingly direct example of the kind of political economy that we have built.
Yeah, man, that story is so wild. Another feature of so Chile is like the biggest buyer and then reseller of like used fast fashion, which is, I guess, very interesting. But it's like a pretty considerable part of their economy. And there's like a free trade zone port that is basically, only dealing in fast fashion, and like an entire city that is basically only dealing in fast fashion. But a very interesting fact about that story too is that there's like a very well-meaning but very bad in practice law. I mean, maybe not bad in practice. I don't know. It's contributed to the situation, at least. It's maybe hard for me to judge as a person from the outside, but there's a law in Chile too that says that you can't destroy like textiles, fabrics in Chile because of the very reason, like kind of that you're seeing, because it would, because everyone would take their unsold clothes and they would just like burn them and incinerate them, which is obviously an environmental catastrophe. And I guess anyways, that's why they end up in the desert in the first place, and rather than going to like a big incinerator somewhere, right? So they all go to the desert because you can't destroy them legally. And then when they get to the desert, they sit there and they rot, and they become like fossilized out there because of like the dry temperatures and all that kind of stuff. And then you set them on fire because then you can make a little bit more money dumping other clothes there. It is such a wild situation, but it's an important one for capitalism because without like disposability of clothes, people would just not buy more clothes. Like if the trend was to buy one very good pair of pants and then to just like wear those pants and then fix those pants whenever they have holes in them, people would not buy those clothes, and then capitalism would not be as robust as it is. There would be like less capitalist growth overall because people would be not buying as much pants, which seems stupid, but it's true. Another example, I think, of this whole situation that is a pretty good demonstration of the problems are coffee cups. According to a 2022 study, the U.S. produces 3 million tons of polystyrene every year. That's a lot of plastic, 3 million tons. And 80% of it, 80% of it ends up in the trash, including 25 billion cups each year. So that translates to, this article says that that translates to the material making up about a third of landfill space, just as a whole. They're just cups, polystyrene cups that will not, degrade and decompose for 500 years or something. Which I'm laughing at, but I think I have to because it's like too dark otherwise. So anyways, that's bad. Manufacturing polystyrene, manufacturing styrofoam, it contributes massively to CO2 emissions. It takes up lots of space in landfill. They're just going to sit there. It is crazy. The environmental cost of the cups is obviously huge, but there's a capitalist logic that is, I think, at play at the very bottom of it all, that it makes sense if your goal is to make a lot of money, and only that.
But wouldn't for my own benefit, isn't a polystyrene cup is like a styrofoam cup that you get at the church basement that you put your coffee in, but it would be different from the like plastic coated cups that you would get at like a Starbucks, which are like paper on the outside or something. Is that right?
The paper cups that you get from like a Starbucks, those are different than a polystyrene cup. A polystyrene cup is like the one that you get in your church basement, like a foam cup or something like that, which are bad and not recyclable. The paper cups, they seem like on the face that you could recycle them, and that they maybe aren't as bad, but they can end up being just as toxic as the plastic ones that you would get rid of as well. Because the paper cups that you get from Starbucks or from any other coffee shop, whatever, they're not just paper. They also have like other kinds of plastic in them that are, like they they can be biodegraded. They can be composted, but it has to be like sort of in the right conditions. And chances are they're going to just go to the dump as well, because no one's going to really be taking the time to like make sure the paper decomposes in just the right way. So anyways, all to say, like, the polystyrene cups are bad. Like the kind of cups that you'd get from like a big styrofoam cup from like, I don't know, Burger King or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. But paper cups also bad. So anyways, there's no good cups out there, is what I'm trying to say. They are all bad. They're all disposable. The polystyrene ones will outlive us in terms of like how long they'll take to decompose, whatever. There's an environmental cost of these cups. There's a capitalist logic that is at play here too, that kind of makes it all make sense though. So the more single-use coffee cups that are produced and bought, the more profits, the more surplus, and the more single-use coffee cups that are produced and bought means more profits, more surplus for capitalists. In the grand view of things, there's like economic growth behind these cups. It's like part of the expanding GDP. And like, that's just cups, if you think about it. So, that we've talked about cups, we've talked about like fast fashion or something. Think about every other little bit of packaging or whatever that you buy and you throw away, that will like end up outliving you. Something that really bothers me. I know this type of plastic exists like in the US for sure. But I always see it in the UK. If you're in the UK and you buy like a boxed sandwich from the Tesco or whatever, there's often like this like little plastic film that kind of covers it, like on the outside, or like even like the film of like the plasticky crisp packets or chip wrappers or whatever. It's not recyclable ever, and I feel like that kind of plastic is all over the place, and it's bad. So that sucks. Anyways, there's all kinds of stuff out there. You can't recycle it, or maybe you could, but probably not, or it'd be too difficult, or people don't recycle it. All these kinds of different things. Whether or not you recycle it or not is kind of like besides the point, because somebody is like designing these things so that you probably will have to throw them away, regardless of whether you recycle them or not. So there's all that kind of stuff. But we can think of even bigger picture than just like cups and packaging. There's also like planned obsolescence, which is a central plank of the capitalist ideology for like basically the same reason. Buying a new phone or a computer or a car, it all adds up to like huge economic activity and growth. And not because you need a new phone, computer, or car, but because it makes somebody else money. That's really basically it. But it keeps like the cycle moving. Even these more like expensive and sophisticated commodities are all built to be trash after only a few years. That's the way that I would like to say it. I think that's a helpful way to start thinking about the commodities within capitalism, because like a reusable cup it's produced to be trash. Like every bit of packaging that you buy is like somebody making it in a factory only to know that it's going to be thrown away like immediately. It's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts if you think about it that way. But it's also true of like sort of like higher end things as well. Like your phone is created and you'll use it for like 2 to 4 years or whatever, and then you're going to throw it away or recycle it, or it'll sit in your drawer or whatever, and you'll buy another one. But anyways, all of that like really adds up. So in 2018, Americans produced 292.4 million tons of trash, which they've averaged out to be 4.9 pounds per person per day, which is a lot of packaging, a lot of plastic, a lot of phones, and whatever else. And interestingly enough, within that 292 million tons, food and plastic waste are at the very top. So that's stuff that gets like thrown out the most. So anyways, all that stuff, it's all like created from the very beginning, knowing that like it's going to end up in the trash. It's going to end up just kind of being thrown away. And I guess that's such a fundamentally weird idea, because we think of capitalism as this thing that was like innovative. It's giving you all these great commodities that you would never have otherwise. But like most of the things that capitalism creates is going to just be trash in the end. So I don't know. It makes you rethink the whole thing, right? Like, how innovative is the system? Because it's actually just making garbage.
It's very innovative if you are a profit oriented person, I guess, but not very innovative when it comes to meeting people's actual needs. I've been reading this book called Waste by Brian Thiel. It's one of these object lessons books. He's an English professor, and he does have this really interesting thing to say about that, though, where he says, well, I'll read this bit. He says, more than mere trash or hazard, a better way to think about waste is to think of it as the unsatisfactory and temporary name we give to the affective relationships we have with our unwanted objects. Waste is the expression of expended, transmuted, or suspended desire. It's the object. To talk about waste is to talk about every other object that has ever existed or will ever exist. Conversely, to talk about any object at all is to gesture toward its ultimate annihilated state. And I think this is the fun part. Waste is every object plus time. I think that is such a good way to put it, that like ultimately everything is waste. But I think the other piece is kind of like, you know, not everything is waste in the same way or for the same reason or kind of produced in order to be waste. And I think that's the kind of, you know, it's like a fun philosophical idea and a really cool thing for an English professor to tell you that everything is waste. And I think that that's true. But, and not to disparage the book, which I haven't finished. He's like a left-wing guy, so whatever. I'm sure he'll talk about capitalism later. But I think it's helpful too to be like, there is also though such a weird like professional network of people whose job is to basically design trash, but we dress up those jobs in like, I don't know, other kinds of euphemisms like package designer, product designer, or whatever. But really, they're garbage designers, which is so wild.
Yeah, I'm here for this sort of philosophical distinction. Everything is trash. Objects plus time equals trash. That's true. Some of that trash we go to the museum and look at. Some of that trash, you know, we put we put there, and it will be in a museum someday, and that's fine. I mean, like I have no problem with that whatsoever.
Yeah,
I guess like to me, the question is about like material throughput and the expenditure of energy.
Right.
On a planet that is like burning up, you know. It's like I love the philosophical thought, and I'm here to entertain those ideas, but also we're gonna all die. We're gonna die because the planet will be too hot to live on, because we have to like,
will be trash sooner than we want.
Exactly. And the dustbins of history will have us all in it, because we had to keep creating all this like stuff for really no reason. Anyways, it's fine. Funko Pops can be in a museum someday, and until then, they can be in a trash heap or whatever. That's okay with me. But it is just like there's two ways of looking at this. There's probably several ways of looking at this, but the one that I'm thinking of in particular is just like the spaceship Earth that we have to sort of pilot into the future or something else.
Yeah, this spaceship Earth that is full of trash. Just the yuckiest spaceship that anybody's ever been on.
Philosophical ideas aside, maybe not entirely, just a little bit. Part of my my trash journey has been looking at a really classic book about consumption and overconsumption. It is a book written by this guy named Vance Packard, and in 1960, the book is called The Waste Makers. And Vance Packard is not a communist. He's just a kind of like American journalist, cultural critic kind of guy. I'd actually never heard of him before I started kind of being interested in this, which is fine. The book is cool. It is very 1960s. It is very like anti-consumerism, but it's a fun one to read. One of the things I really liked in it was in the very beginning of the book, he has this like sort of funny imaginary world. It's basically a thought experiment where he's like, what would the world be like if marketers got to design it, if marketers had the sole say in how everything worked? The whole sort of idea of marketing is to figure out how to get around the economic problem of saturation. Like people buy cars, people buy clothes, whatever, but marketers are there to try to figure out how to get people to buy more cars, more clothes, etc. So he says this about the imaginary world run by marketers. It would be a world where buildings are made of paper mache. They're constantly torn down and reconstructed every few months so that people can buy a new apartment or a new building. And it's funny because he's like, well, like that would be great. That would be great for the development industry. It'd be great for real estate. Things would be moving so quickly. People could buy things as much as they wanted. He also has this whole bit too about cars that have expiration dates, which he's kind of gesturing towards planned obsolescence. And maybe before planned obsolescence was like a very popular idea or one that was one that people knew about. But he has this whole bit where people would drive a car for a few years until the expiration date hit, and then they'd have to turn it back into the factory, and they'd get like maybe a tax credit for doing so, because then they would have to go out and they'd like rebuy a new car and kind of keep things going again. And then the one that I always thought I think is like maybe the most interesting is like, he imagined these factories that are built on the sides of cliffs. And when people are interested in buying the commodities, buying the commodities from the factories, the conveyor belts. They churn them out towards the people, and people can go get them. But when there's no consumer appetite, they keep producing, and they just like kind of dump immediately into a big like trash heap at the bottom of a hill or something. Which is an idea that is kind of funny because, like, I mean, you know, it's either way they end up there. Things are created to be disposable, so like whether you like it or not, it's whether you buy it or not, it's going to end up in the trash one way or the other. So Packard writes that the city of the future is the one that marketers have like a wet dream for, because it's like finally defeated the economic problem of saturation through disposability. And in a lot of ways, this type of world is materialized. I don't know, like whether or not you buy things, it goes to the trash. Whether or not there is like a government mandated expiration date for your car, like there's an expiration date for your car, and it's probably like, you know, 10 to 14 years or whatever. Buildings aren't made of paper mache, so that one's not quite as true. But like, there are different ways that we consume housing through rent and all kinds of other stuff that is maybe not disposable, but renters might feel disposable in the process. I think the whole situation is interesting though, because there is a problem within capitalism. And it's the one that Packard describes, that there's a problem of saturation. So within, you know, the way the capitalist economy works is that, you know, a capitalist, he takes money, he puts it into a factory or whatever to buy capital. He buys a factory, he buys the means of production, he buys the machines, all this kind of stuff, right? And then he sells it. It's turned into a commodity. It's turned into a profit, and then he is rewarded with more money than he put in. That's the whole sort of premise of capitalism. You put money in, you create something, you sell it, and then you get more money back. And then that is sort of a cycle that continues, right? And we've talked in the past about how corporations, you know, join together in sort of monopoly-like structures to price fix and things like that. And we've talked about how surplus is a big problem for capitalism, but we haven't talked much about the problem of saturation and the way that is also a problem. Within Marxist economics, there is a particular idea that is called the tendency for the rate of profit to fall. So basically, this is Capital Volume 3, if you want to, like, I don't know, do your homework or whatever. But basically, the idea is that, like, you're doing this whole process, right? You're doing this whole capitalist process of creating profits, creating surplus, and so on. And you have to find a place to, like, spend that surplus to keep your business growing. And, like, one place you might invest some of that money is in the machinery that your workers use to produce said commodities. So you invest more money in a machine that creates regular coffee cups, and everyone bought a coffee mug or whatever out there, and they had their perfect ideal coffee mug, and it would never break, and it would just kind of exist forever. Then you would be shit out of luck, because people would buy the coffee mug, and then they would never have to buy a coffee mug again. And then the rate of profit would fall, because you would have invested all of this money and time and, you know, like, worker energy and stuff into creating a coffee mug. But then everyone would buy one, and then no one would need one, and then your factory would go out of business. So the problem that disposability solves is exactly that. So instead of everyone getting their good, perfect coffee mug that never breaks, the indestructible coffee mug, instead of that, then capitalists just create disposable coffee mugs, disposable cutlery, disposable, you know, to-go boxes, disposable clothes, and so on, so that the rate of profit doesn't fall. People just keep having to rebuy these things over and over again, which is not only good for, you know, the capitalist who owns the paper cup company or whatever, but it's also really good for capitalism in general, because it grows the entire economy. It grows all of it together. So saturation of products is a barrier to growth that trash solves. And anyways, in this very roundabout way of saying it, that's why trash is integral to the whole idea of capitalism. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I really appreciate you listening.
It's great, and I'm definitely going to get a coffee in the lobby in one of these polystyrene cups to just let all these important thoughts kind of swirl around in my mind. One thing that this all makes me think about is a line that's also repeated a lot, or was repeated a lot, by Pope Francis, where he would talk about what he called a throwaway culture. And I think it's one of those lines that feels kind of intuitively right. Like you hear it and you're like, I guess you kind of take for granted that, yeah, that describes the way that we live. Or, you kind of like it's easy to sentimentalize to say, like, oh, yeah, we have a culture that excludes people or kind of rejects people and so on. But the more I think about trash, the more that kind of line has been resonating a lot in my mind. And it comes up a lot in Pope Francis's stuff, but in Laudato Si, it's present in several places. And he also talks specifically about garbage and waste. There's like, I don't know, some of it's not very original. It's just like the Pope saying that there's too much trash and people are affected by that, and that's not good. So I think that's fine. But he also calls for like a circular model of production in Laudato Si, talking about a throwaway culture. And he kind of closes his whole section saying a serious consideration of this issue, talking about moderating consumption, would be one way of counteracting the throwaway culture which affects the entire planet. But it must be said that only limited progress has been made in this regard. And I think what's fascinating is Pope Francis obviously has this concern for the material reality of garbage, but over the course of his papacy, the throwaway culture line comes up in many other contexts. So he talks about it when he talks about the poor and how the global political and economic situation excludes the poor, but also throws them away, like sees them as trash or things to be dumped or disappeared. He often said the same thing about the elderly and other kinds of, I guess, just cultural fixation on inconvenience, that we have this throwaway culture that just wants to throw stuff away, to not cherish things or reproduce things, recycle things, reuse things. And when that comes to interactions with people, it's also easy to instrumentalize people and kind of try to dispose of them or not really care. And I think that once you kind of have that sort of theological ontology of garbage, that we live in a garbage world designed to make us treat others and the planet like garbage, it raises so many other interesting and troubling points of analysis. Like I just think about, homelessness in many major cities, especially here in Toronto. It's like we're the city is always like fighting with itself about whether or not it will make more homeless shelters or build housing. And the shelter system is, essentially, unfortunately, kind of like a dump for people. You just sort of like put people in there for a while and hope that they get out or not. I don't know. Or elderly homes, a lot of very shitty elderly homes that end up just being sort of like dumps for human beings who, I don't know, society thinks are not useful. And I think that there's something to that of Pope Francis saying there's a throwaway culture. There's a kind of like ontology of trash making in capitalism. And the more I like try to take that seriously as a profound idea, not like a simple or sentimentalizing idea, the more I feel like there's kind of some interesting radicalizing potential there. Like, what's the opposite of a throwaway culture? I think that's like a good question for Christians to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful idea. And the throwaway culture, the throwaway people, the people who are left to rot or whatever, is not disconnected, I think, from it's not just a cultural issue. Obviously, it's a something that emerges from capitalism. We can see a lot of that throwaway culture in the ways that like jobs and work starting to shift in more sort of like fractalized ways, where even employees are sort of people that you like take on to do something and then you toss them away without like paying them even the minimum wage or giving them health benefits and so on, right? Like that's like the whole sort of like idea behind Uber or delivery work, all kinds of things that kind of like just fractalize people's time, or precarize them as workers who don't have sort of a stable or steady income, is a part of that process of like throwing away. I mean, even to a certain extent, you could say that is one of the key features of incarceration, that people get kind of tossed in another bin for a while and not to think about. And the labor that they do there is like, it's capitalized upon by big businesses and, and governments as well. But it's not like productive in the same way that just having a job is productive. It's like sort of a whole different thing. But yeah, I think that's a really, I don't know, a pretty profound idea, that it's not just the packaging that is disposable, but it is all kinds of people who are disposable as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a line in Angela Davis's Our Prison's Obsolete, where she talks about the disposability of human beings being kind of marked by the incarceration system in general, which I hadn't thought about. So I think that's a good piece. But yeah, I guess all to like circle it back around. If at the beginning of the episode you said liberation is also the abolition of trash, I think that like maybe those are the kinds of things, the kinds of distinctions that are like hard to parse out, but would be really fun for somebody to parse out. Like, what are the, at what point is trash the thing that has to be abolished, or like trash making structures have to be abolished? And then what's the kind of like good waste that has to be proliferated? Like I think too about, I mean, this is like a weird thought to introduce at the very end of this episode, but like government waste is, you can have bad waste through corruption and whatever, but from like a particular capitalist point of view, not everyone, but a particular one, when the government spends money on social services or like public transportation or food stamps or whatever, that's like wasteful spending just by definition in and of itself. It's not productive necessarily, according, again, to some capitalist economics. I think that's actually untrue. It's actually good for capitalism too, to have the government spend on people's basic needs. But nevertheless, it's kind of like what waste is seen as like bad, but actually is good, and what waste is seen as basically benign, but is actually like destroying the whole planet. Just a lot going on with the kind of rhetoric around waste.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. For example, like the nationalization of rail or something, or nationalization of buses or something like, or transport in general is maybe a good example because it's like not profitable. And you could look at that and say like, well, that's government waste because they're blowing money on getting people from point A to point B and sort of at a reasonable price or for free or whatever. But that's not that's it's wasteful if you're a capitalist and you're an idiot, but it's like not wasteful if you're a person who rides the bus. So yeah, a great way to think of it.
Yeah, or like military spending, we should say, is like wasteful.
That's wasteful. Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah,
that's garbage. Don't put money in the garbage.
Absolutely. I mean, like, it has one purpose, and it is to explode. Are you kidding me? That is like what is an explosion but throwing something in the bin? But it's like exciting when it hits or something. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. So who knows what to say ultimately about garbage, except that it is very funny what we decide is and isn't, what kind of garbage we should be liberated from, what kind of garbage we should liberate. Just a lot going on there. So I don't know. I guess we'll keep thinking about trash for a while. I can't stop myself.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can think about that too. I mean, like a whole bunch of artists will always use recycled goods, and like, right. Is that trash? Is it something different? Is it, it's, it's a very funny idea even to think about art and reused products or commodities or materials, because it's like taking something that is trash and then all of a sudden it's like very expensive again. The imbuing it with more value. Yeah, well, anyways, we can kind of keep on this vibe maybe in the next few weeks. We've got a handful of different books to read and ideas to think about. I feel like thinking about marketing and consumption, like the consumer society, is probably where we're going to go to next. So if you're interested in trash and why we keep buying things and throwing them away, I guess stay tuned to this podcast.
And if you're not, you can throw away your headphones. Don't ever listen to it again. Headphones are just trash plus time, so forget about it.
Someday they'll be fossilized and in a museum, so that'll be exciting for future generations.
Thanks for listening to the Magnificast. You can support our show by wasting your own money in a good and productive way at patreon.com/themagnificast. If you choose to waste your income in that way, you can waste more of your time on Discord. We have a great Discord chat. Lots of good stuff. It's Sunday when we're recording this, so people are sharing what's going on in the lectionary, some fun readings of biblical passages. It's just a lot of good general chat going on in there these days. Our music is by Amaria Armstrong. The outro is by The Illogical Spoon, and we'll see you next week.
I don't wanna get up for church in the morning, soul's alive. Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation, never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between us and our Lord. Jackson, you keep your hoods up, well, you keep your hoods up, and you stay up late. In Jackson, you keep your hoods up, well, you keep your hoods up, and you stay up late. Oh, don't mind a cold night, but we might mind if you leave too soon. So come on now, it's still early. Besides, what else are you gonna do? As we kissed in the alley by the Michigan Theater, fall snow was glowing in the lights of the downtown. Saw a spark in your eyes, I just spoke it. Said we're gonna turn this whole place upside down. Then you said, my dear, do you really mean this? I said, I only know what I feel right now. I said, poets lie, sometime come true. Stay away from me, where see what we can do. Poets lie, sometime come true. Stay away from me, where see what we can do in my town. I don't wanna get up for church in the morning, church in the morning, souls alive. Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation, never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between us and our Lord. In Jackson, you keep your hoods up, well, you keep your hoods up and you stay up late. In Jackson, you keep your hoods up, well, you keep your hoods up and you stay up late. This the kind of town folks get stuck in. Yeah, people get stuck here, but I chose to stay. If you ever want to know something, or know someplace, you just can't know them all. At some point, you must make a choice and choose someplace and make a home.